The summer of 1940 witnessed Britain teetering on the brink of collapse. The Luftwaffe's relentless bombardment pounded British cities night after night. Submarine warfare strangled supply convoys in the Atlantic, while the RAF hemorrhaged pilots faster than training facilities could replenish. Factories worked around the clock to churn out Hurricanes and Spitfires, but a pressing issue loomed: a critical shortage of aluminum. Every precious sheet had to be rationed, prioritized, and fought over by competing government agencies. The Air Ministry faced an impossible dilemma: build more fighters to defend the homeland or construct more bombers to retaliate against Germany. With resources dwindling, they could not pursue both options simultaneously. Geoffrey de Havilland's wooden bomber concept was initially met with skepticism by senior RAF officers. They dismissed his blueprints, viewing the idea of a plywood and balsa high-performance bomber as absurd as fighting the Nazis with paper airplanes. Wood was considered outdated, suitable only for furniture and training gliders, not modern warfare. The demand was for industrial materials like aluminum and steel, the hallmarks of progress. Yet, de Havilland persisted, determined to prove the viability of his unorthodox design in the pressure cooker environment of strategic material shortages. His vision for a combat aircraft made almost entirely of wood, rather than the fabric and wire biplanes of World War I, would ultimately challenge the conventional thinking and transform the course of aerial warfare. The British government recognized an untapped resource in the nation's abundant forests and skilled woodworkers, who could rapidly retool their workshops to produce aircraft at a fraction of the cost of aluminum models. While the world fixated on the scarcity of aluminum, these furniture craftsmen, piano makers, and boat builders possessed unparalleled expertise in working with timber. Their workshops could be repurposed in a matter of weeks, without the need for specialized metalworking equipment. The economics were straightforward. 3 wooden aircraft could be built for the price of a single aluminum bomber, without compromising the production of Spitfire fighters. Additionally, the Air Ministry overlooked a crucial advantage of wooden aircraft: their inherent resilience to damage, especially in the event of a crash landing. The innovative sandwich construction of birch, plywood, and balsa wood envisioned by de Havilland possessed remarkable strength-to-weight properties. This allowed the airframe to be molded into smooth, aerodynamic contours that were challenging and costly to achieve with metal. Furthermore, this unconventional design exhibited a remarkably small radar cross-section compared to its metal-bodied counterparts, rendering it virtually invisible to the primitive radar systems of the 1940s. However, securing approval for such a radical concept was no easy feat. De Havilland had one final card to play, and he played it masterfully. He promised the development of a bomber so swift that it would not require defensive armaments, eliminating the need for gun turrets and their associated crew, thereby reducing overall weight and enhancing performance. The proposed aircraft was designed to outpace adversary fighters through sheer velocity. Conventional bombers of the era were heavily armed and crewed by teams of 5 to 7 personnel to operate the armaments. In contrast, de Havilland's concept called for a 2-person crew in an unarmed airframe, relying solely on exceptional speed for defense. This revolutionary approach was viewed as both radical and desperate, yet as Britain faced dire circumstances in the summer of 1940, such unconventional ideas began to seem plausible. Reluctantly, the Air Ministry granted approval in March 1940, ordering a single prototype to test de Havilland's unorthodox theory, albeit with minimal enthusiasm. What transpired next would prove pivotal. One of the most captivating aircraft development initiatives of the entire conflict era was undoubtedly the endeavor undertaken. De Havilland's dedicated team exhibited a fervor bordering on obsession in their efforts. They recognized that each passing day Britain stood alone against Hitler's forces was a day the nation might not survive. The prototype had to take to the skies, and it had to do so swiftly. The construction method they pioneered was genuinely groundbreaking. The fuselage was fabricated using an innovative sandwich technique. Thin birch plywood sheets formed the exterior, with a balsa wood core sandwiched in between, and another layer of birch plywood on the interior. This ingenious design yielded an exceptionally rigid yet lightweight structure capable of withstanding immense stresses. The entire assembly was bonded together using a casein-based adhesive. The furniture artisans of Havilland, the epicenter of Britain's furniture manufacturing, found themselves applying their expertise in crafting dining tables and wardrobes to the construction of bomber fuselages. Utilizing a sophisticated box spar design with plywood skins, they engineered a structure that combined remarkable strength and exceptional aerodynamics. De Havilland's team of engineers masterfully created smooth compound curves, a feat that would have been immensely challenging to achieve with aluminum. The resulting aircraft boasted unparalleled speed, with every line and surface meticulously optimized for minimal drag. Absent were the protruding turrets that would have disrupted the streamlined silhouette. The sleek, streamlined silhouette of the prototype sliced effortlessly through the air, its gunports creating a subtle turbulence. On November 25, 1940, test pilot Geoffrey de Havilland Jr., the designer's son, took the aircraft up for its inaugural flight from Hatfield Aerodrome. As he pushed the throttles forward, the onlookers knew they were witnessing something remarkable. The yellow-painted prototype lifted off the runway and climbed with a sense of urgency, as if it had an important engagement to attend. De Havilland Jr. returned with a grin, reporting that the aircraft handled beautifully and felt faster than anything he had ever flown. The engineers were astonished to discover that their design had exceeded their own predictions, proving to be faster and more maneuverable than anticipated. The Air Ministry's initial doubts gradually gave way as the aircraft's performance exceeded expectations, boasting a range beyond what anyone had anticipated. Eager to further assess its capabilities, they ordered additional prototypes, though remained unconvinced. The true test would come when the aircraft faced the rigors of combat operations. Could it withstand the challenges of enemy territory, its wooden construction proving resilient to battle damage, harsh field conditions, and the extremes of temperature and moisture encountered in active service? Skeptics were quick to voice their concerns, arguing that wood's susceptibility to rot, warping, and fire posed grave vulnerabilities. A single lucky cannon strike, they warned, could reduce the entire airframe to splinters. Metal aircraft, on the other hand, could absorb punishment and be easily patched with aluminum plates, enabling a safe return. The de Havilland Mosquito was a remarkable aircraft that defied the skeptics. Designed to be both swift and adaptable, it would soon emerge as one of the most versatile combat planes of World War II. Across the Channel, German intelligence closely monitored British aviation advancements, drawing on a range of sources: informants, reconnaissance imagery, intercepted communications, and a web of spies feeding data to Luftwaffe headquarters. When word reached them of a new British bomber constructed from wood, their response was precisely what one might anticipate from the force that had. The Luftwaffe's intelligence analysts scoffed at the British Mosquito aircraft, dismissing it as mere desperation masquerading as innovation. One 1941 assessment went so far as to describe it as a wooden toy, suggesting Britain's industry was so strained that they had resorted to building planes like it was 1915. The analysis further speculated that the entire program was likely propaganda to conceal the struggles of British manufacturing. After all, the Luftwaffe was flying cutting-edge metal fighters like the Bf-109 and Fw-190, armed with cannons and machine guns, a stark contrast to the British's plywood constructions. German pilots shared this disdain, as the German pilots had long been contending with the lumbering British bombers, such as the Wellingtons, Benhams, and Hamptons, which they considered easy prey. While these aircraft were equipped with defensive guns, a skilled pilot could easily navigate around them. The standard tactic was straightforward: attack from below and behind, unleash cannon fire into the engines and fuel tanks, then swiftly disengage before the gunners could lock onto the assailant. These bombers, devoid of offensive firepower, were essentially moving targets with additional steps. The German pilots anticipated effortless victories once these wooden constructions began appearing over the Reich. This dismissive attitude extended to the highest echelons, with Reich's Marshal Hermann Göring, the commander of the Luftwaffe and one of Hitler's closest confidants, sharing the sentiment. Göring, a renowned World War I fighter pilot and a trusted confidant, was informed about the Mosquito reports in mid-1941. His response perfectly encapsulated the arrogance that would later haunt the Luftwaffe. Göring had built a formidable reputation as a fighter ace during the previous conflict and considered himself an expert in air combat. He dismissed the wooden bomber without defensive armament, as it violated every principle of bomber design. Göring instructed his staff to avoid wasting time on the British's desperate projects, as the Luftwaffe had more pressing concerns to address, such as the growing American involvement, the brutal air war on the Eastern Front, and the defense of German cities against night raids. This contempt was deeply ingrained in the Luftwaffe's doctrine and training, as fighter pilots were taught to identify and engage specific targets. The Mosquito's distinctive silhouette, engine noise, and flight behavior made it readily identifiable. Though its profiles emerged in recognition manuals by late 1941, instructors initially viewed it as a mere curiosity. If you spot one, it should be an easy kill, they asserted. A twin-engine design lacking defensive armaments and constructed of wood, the Mosquito was deemed incapable of withstanding punishment. The standard tactic was a stern attack aimed at the engines. German intelligence, still working with imprecise performance data, assumed a wooden aircraft must be slower than its metal counterparts. This set the stage for a rude awakening in aviation history, as the Luftwaffe had convinced itself that the Mosquito was. The British had long dismissed the Mosquito as a mere novelty, a sign of their own military frailty, and an easy target for the German Air Force. However, within months, the Luftwaffe's finest pilots would be reporting back to their commanders with incredulous accounts, struggling to believe that a wooden aircraft could outmaneuver Germany's cutting-edge fighters. On September 20, 1941, a quiet test flight took place that would forever alter the course of aerial warfare. A lone Mosquito prototype, designated W451, took off from Royal Air Force Bosam with a straightforward objective: to photograph the German-occupied port of Bordeaux in broad daylight. The pilot, squadron leader Rear Clerk, was not embarking on a combat mission, but rather a purely. The Mosquito pilot seized the opportunity for reconnaissance, eager to test the aircraft's resilience in enemy airspace. Climbing to an altitude of 20,000 feet, he crossed the English Channel and penetrated deep into occupied France. German radar operators swiftly detected the intruder and scrambled 3 seasoned Messerschmitt Bf 109 pilots to intercept. These were no novices, but experienced aviators flying one of the war's most formidable fighters. They anticipated a routine close-range engagement, expecting to shoot down the bomber and return to base with another kill marked on their fuselages. However, as they closed in on firing position, something extraordinary occurred. The Mosquito simply accelerated away, leaving the astonished German pilots to push their throttles to emergency power in a futile chase. The wooden aircraft steadily pulled away, leaving the team in stunned disbelief as their target shrank to a mere speck on the horizon before vanishing completely. Clark completed his photographic run and returned to England without a single shot fired. The RAF leadership closely examined the mission reports, eager for more evidence. On November 15, 1941, the Mosquito entered operational service with 105 Squadron at RAF Swanton, Mali. Their first official combat mission followed just 6 days later on November 21, with 3 aircraft tasked to strike targets in Oslo and Stavanger, Norway. Flight Lieutenant Alistair Taylor commanded the formation, flying low over the terrain. The Mosquito Squadron's daring mission over the North Sea aimed to evade radar detection. The plan called for a swift strike along the Norwegian coast, hitting the targets before the German fighters could respond. The Oslo raid unfolded precisely as intended. Taylor's Mosquito swooped in low, unleashing its 4 500-pound bombs on the German headquarters and climbing away before the anti-aircraft guns could lock on. The second aircraft struck the Stavanger target with equal accuracy, but the third crew encountered a Messerschmitt Bf 110 heavy fighter on patrol. The German pilot, certain of an easy kill, moved to attack the Mosquito. His confidence, however, proved short-lived. The Mosquito pilots swiftly outmaneuvered the enemy, leaving the German fighter in a cloud of dust. The Spitfire pilot effortlessly outpaced the cumbersome Bf-110, leaving it trailing in his wake like a sluggish cargo vessel vainly chasing a nimble speedboat. 1344 whispers of these astonishing feats rapidly spread through the RAF squadrons, yet the Luftwaffe remained unconvinced. 1350 German intelligence officers dismissed the reports, assuming the British were exaggerating performance figures to bolster morale. They had witnessed this 1357 propaganda tactic before, claiming an unbeatable new wonder weapon, then feeding the story to neutral journalists in the hope of intimidating the adversary. Nobody in Berlin believed a wooden aircraft could outmaneuver purpose-built fighters, as the laws of 1403 physics simply did not work that way. Metal was stronger, faster, and more modern. Wood was merely a desperate 1410 stopgap measure doomed to failure. The Luftwaffe soon discovered that even the most meticulous strategies could be outmatched by bold, improvisational tactics. The unassuming Mosquito had drawn first blood, and this wooden wonder was just getting started. German fighter pilots were about to face their most frustrating months, chasing an elusive foe they could see but never catch. The numbers told a tale that struck fear in the hearts of German aviators. A fully loaded Mosquito BME-A4 bomber could cruise at a blistering 380 miles per hour, outpacing nearly every fighter in the Luftwaffe's arsenal. In contrast, the vaunted Messerschmitt Bf-109 Axef topped out at around 300 miles per hour in level flight, a sobering realization for the German pilots. The Fowler-Wolf F-190A, unveiled in late 1941 as the Luftwaffe's response to the Spitfire, could achieve around 395 mass under optimal conditions. However, this required the German fighters to be airborne without external fuel tanks, climbing to intercept altitude, and perfectly positioned for an attack run. In contrast, Mosquito crews merely needed to keep their engines at full throttle and maintain altitude. This placed German pilots in an untenable tactical predicament. If they spotted a Mosquito below them, they could dive to attack, sacrificing altitude for speed. The Mosquito's unparalleled speed and agility rendered the Luftwaffe's conventional fighter tactics utterly ineffective. As soon as the German pilots aligned their sights, the nimble British aircraft would swiftly accelerate and vanish from view within seconds. Even if the Mosquito was spotted at the same altitude, the Luftwaffe fighters had no chance of catching it. And if the Mosquito was flying at a higher altitude, the pursuit was hopeless. The British crew could simply tilt the nose downward to gain speed, leaving the struggling German fighters far behind before they could reach firing range. Maneuvers that had proven flawless against every other bomber were rendered completely useless against the Mosquito. The Luftwaffe's preferred tactic of a rear attack, where they would match the bomber's speed and unleash fire on the engines and fuselage, was rendered ineffective by the Mosquito's unmatched performance. The Mosquito's agile maneuverability and sturdy wooden construction posed significant challenges for pilots attempting to engage it in close-quarters combat. With a closing speed exceeding 700 miles per hour, the narrow window for effective firing was extremely limited, requiring exceptional skill or sheer chance to score hits. Furthermore, the Mosquito's altitude capabilities, enabled by its powerful Rolls-Royce Merlin engines with advanced two-stage superchargers, further complicated the task of intercepting and destroying this formidable aircraft. The Mosquito's high-altitude prowess posed a significant challenge for German fighters. Cruising effortlessly at 30,000 feet, well above the operational ceiling of most Axis aircraft, the twin-engine British plane left its pursuers struggling to keep up. The Bf-109 and Fw-90 fighters, gasping for air, found their engines strained and maneuverability diminished at such lofty altitudes, while the Mosquito's crew comfortably breathed oxygen and observed the German fighters' futile attempts to reach them. Luftwaffe after-action reports from 1942 and 1943 paint a picture of mounting frustration. Sightings of enemy aircraft at 25,000 feet were met with failed interception attempts, as the Mosquito outran its pursuers. Attacks on the British bomber were thwarted by the target's ability to accelerate before a firing solution could be achieved. In one instance, a German fighter chased an unidentified twin-engine aircraft for 15 minutes, only to break off the engagement due to fuel constraints, unable to close the range. The Mosquito's superior high-altitude performance proved a significant tactical advantage, leaving the Luftwaffe's intelligence services grappling with the challenge posed by this elusive and capable adversary. The engineers behind the wooden aircraft were repeatedly astonished as pilots reported speeds that defied expectations. German fighter aces, renowned for their prowess against various adversaries, now found themselves outpaced by this plywood and glue bomber, a humiliating and maddening development. However, the Mosquito's capabilities extended beyond mere velocity, as it demonstrated a precision that would transform the conduct of warfare. The prevailing bombing tactics of 1942 had been straightforward, but the Mosquito was about to upend that paradigm. The Royal Air Force's Bomber Command faced a daunting challenge during the war: how to effectively strike enemy targets while minimizing the staggering losses of their aircraft and crews. The conventional approach of saturating an area with explosives from a large bomber force often proved ineffective, with most bombs missing their marks. Tragically, these missions came at a heavy price, with bomber crews' life expectancies measured in mere weeks due to the crippling attrition rates. However, a potential solution emerged on September 25, 1942. 4 nimble Mosquito aircraft from 105 and 139 squadrons were tasked with a precision strike against the Gestapo headquarters in Oslo, Norway. This target, situated in the heart of a civilian district, had previously been deemed off-limits for conventional bombing raids due to the unacceptable risk of collateral damage. The Gestapo headquarters in Norway was the target of a swift and surgical airstrike by the elite Mosquito squadrons. Traveling at breakneck speeds, the aircraft swooped in low, catching the German forces off guard. With split-second precision, the pilots released their payloads, with 3 of the 4 500-pound bombs piercing the windows and detonating inside the building. The 4th struck the facade, further devastating the structure. The German casualties were substantial, while Norwegian civilian losses were minimal. The Mosquitoes had completed their mission and were back over the North Sea before the Luftwaffe could even scramble their fighters. This daring raid set a precedent for similar operations across occupied Europe. On January 30, 1943, the Luftwaffe was planning a counter-offensive. The Nazis had planned a grandiose celebration in Berlin to commemorate the 10th year since Hitler's ascension to power. At the heart of this propaganda spectacle was a speech scheduled to be delivered by Hermann Göring, which would be broadcast across the nation. However, 3 Mosquito aircraft from 105 Squadron had other ideas. They timed their arrival to coincide precisely with the start of Göring's address, swooping over the city in broad daylight and dropping their bombs on the broadcasting building. Göring's speech was abruptly cut off mid-sentence, and the German radio network fell silent. This psychological blow dealt a devastating impact, as the RAF had disrupted the Nazis' biggest celebration of the year, and the Luftwaffe was powerless to stop them. The Philips radio factory in Eindhoven, Netherlands was the site of a meticulously executed air raid on December 6, 1942. This facility was producing critical electronic components for German radar and night fighter systems, despite being situated amidst residential areas. A formidable aerial force of 9-3 aircraft, including Mosquito Pathfinders and the main strike group of Venturas and Bostons, converged on the target. The Mosquitoes led the way, marking the objectives with exceptional precision. The outcome was devastating, as over 140 of the 188 buildings in the complex were either destroyed or severely damaged. Remarkably, Dutch civilian casualties were kept to a minimum given the scale of the operation. It took the Germans 6 months to partially restore the factory's production capabilities. The dawn of February 18, 1944 witnessed the execution of Operation Jericho, a renowned precision raid targeting Amiens prison. British intelligence had determined this to be the only means of rescuing French resistance fighters slated for execution by the Gestapo. A squadron of 19 Mosquito aircraft from the 140th Wing braved the channel at near ground level, navigating by rural landmarks. The lead plane's bombs breached the outer walls, while subsequent aircraft struck the guards' quarters and prison administration building. The timing was so meticulously coordinated that the first prisoners were fleeing even as the final Mosquito departed the area. Over 250 individuals were liberated in this daring operation. The daring raid became the stuff of legend, a meticulously executed surgical strike that conventional bombers could never have accomplished. The Mosquito, already unmatched in daylight, soon prowled the night skies over Germany with even greater lethality. By late 1942, a new variant emerged, bristling with firepower. The Mosquito NFMK-2 night fighter boasted 4 20mm Hispano cannons in the belly and 4.303 Browning machine guns in the nose. But its true edge came from the AIMK IV airborne interception radar, housed in a distinctive thimble-shaped nose that replaced the clear bombardier's position of the bomber variants. This potent combination of speed, armament, and advanced radar transformed the Mosquito into a formidable nocturnal predator. The Luftwaffe's dominance of the night skies was disrupted by an unexpected adversary, the Mosquito. This nimble aircraft proved to be a formidable hunter, outpacing its prey. Since the war's onset, German bomber crews had reigned supreme under the cover of darkness. Formidable platforms like the Henkel Ho 100 LMS, Dornier Do-27s, and Junkers D-88s could operate with relative impunity once night fell, as locating aircraft in the pitch-black skies was an immense challenge. British night fighters, such as the Bristol Beaufighter, had achieved some success, but they lacked the speed to catch many German bombers that had advance warning of their approach. The Mosquito, however, fundamentally altered this dynamic. It outpaced every German bomber by a significant margin, allowing it to climb rapidly and engage the enemy on more favorable terms. This agile and versatile aircraft proved to be a game-changer, disrupting the Luftwaffe's dominance of the night skies. The Mosquito's enhanced fuel efficiency allowed it to maintain its position on station for extended durations. Wing Commander John Cunningham emerged as the public face of the Mosquito's night fighter operations. Initially, the RAF sought to obscure the aircraft's role by attributing Cunningham's successes to his exceptional eyesight, hence his moniker, Cat's Eyes Cunningham. This propaganda narrative claimed his sharp vision stemmed from a diet rich in carrots, a fabrication intended to conceal the existence of airborne radar from German intelligence. In reality, Cunningham and his radar operator would patrol at high altitudes, awaiting ground controllers to guide them toward incoming German raiders. The AI radar system could detect targets from around 4 miles away, and the Mosquito interceptor exhibited a ruthlessly efficient interception pattern once it had locked onto its target. The radar operator would guide the pilot until visual contact was established, typically within 500 to 1,000 feet behind the enemy bomber. The Mosquito would then maneuver into position, matching the target's speed and altitude before closing in. At a range of around 200 yards, the pilot would slightly elevate the nose and open fire. The 420mm cannons unleashed a devastating 1-second barrage, hurling approximately 30 shells weighing 5 ounces each and traveling at 2,800 feet per second. German bombers stood little chance against this lethal onslaught. The German bombers faced a formidable challenge in the skies over Britain. Many of them were unable to withstand the intense barrage, disintegrating mid-flight or plummeting to the ground in a fiery descent. By the summer of 1943, Luftwaffe crews were reporting encounters with a mysterious British night fighter that seemed to defy all logic. Appearing from the darkness, this aircraft moved with lightning speed, swiftly dispatching its targets before they could react. Luftwaffe intelligence found these reports difficult to believe. How could the British possess a night fighter faster than the German bombers? The traditional Beaufighters were manageable, as they could be outrun if spotted early. But these new adversaries behaved quite differently, closing the distance too rapidly for the bombers to evade. The Mosquito's swift and agile nature allowed it to outmaneuver German aircraft during high-speed pursuits. Remarkably, these versatile British fighters even engaged and defeated German night interceptors at altitudes where the enemy crews believed they were safe. The tables had dramatically turned, as the Mosquito Knights now hunted the Luftwaffe's Bf-110s and Ju-88s, attempting to intercept RAF bomber formations. The hunters had become the hunted, and German aircrew morale steadily declined, never to fully recover. Hermann Göring's public outburst became one of the most infamous moments of the air war, perfectly encapsulating the Mosquito's devastating impact on Luftwaffe confidence. In January 1943, the Reich Marshal visited a fighter unit, only to launch into a tirade that shocked all present. The Royal Air Force pilots often recounted the commander's words, which had become a fixture in their discussions. Witnessing the Mosquito aircraft evoked a strong emotional response, as the speaker expressed envy over the British's ability to construct a high-performance wooden plane, a feat that surpassed the capabilities of their own forces. This candid remark, made in the presence of junior officers and enlisted personnel, quickly disseminated throughout the military organization, reflecting the speaker's frank acknowledgement of their technological disadvantage. The Luftwaffe's commander's private admission that the Mosquito outmatched anything Germany had produced dealt a devastating blow on multiple fronts. Firstly, it confirmed the enemy's technical superiority, shattering the propaganda narrative of Aryan engineering dominance. Secondly, it revealed the German leadership's genuine envy of an adversary's design, a humiliating reality. Most damaging, it conveyed to every Luftwaffe pilot that their commander knew they couldn't catch these aircraft and had no expectation they would. The psychological impact was immeasurable. British intelligence intercepted German communications, which showed fighter pilots growing increasingly reluctant to engage Mosquitoes. Why waste fuel and risk their lives chasing an aircraft they couldn't catch? Some pilots even reported mechanical problems to avoid scrambling against the Mosquito. The Mosquito's remarkable speed and agility made it a formidable adversary for German fighters. While some pilots attempted to pursue the elusive aircraft, their efforts often proved futile, as the target would swiftly evade their grasp. Repeated failures to catch the Mosquito had a devastating impact on morale, as pilots could no longer take solace in the superior skill of their opponents. Losing a dogfight to a Spitfire was one thing, but being outpaced by a wooden bomber was a humiliating experience. In response, German propaganda sought to spin the Mosquito's capabilities as a testament to British brutality. Articles in Nazi newspapers claimed the wooden aircraft were being used to conduct cowardly, hit-and-run raids on civilian targets, implying the Mosquito's design was a terror weapon rather than a legitimate military asset. The subtext was clear. The Mosquito's performance was a source of shame and embarrassment for the German forces. The Mosquito's success was not a true military triumph, but rather a reflection of Britain's moral decline. German civilians could see the results, as the Mosquitoes targeted precision objectives, not indiscriminate bombing of residential areas, and they accomplished this in broad daylight while the Luftwaffe fighters watched helplessly from the ground. This envy went beyond Göring's public acknowledgement, as German aircraft designers studied captured intelligence on the Mosquito's construction and attempted to replicate its design philosophy. The result was the Faller-Wolf TAR-154 Mosquito, a wooden night fighter explicitly intended as Germany's response to the British aircraft, even using a similar name. The TAR-1054 program became a case study in this endeavor. The German efforts to develop a wooden aircraft encountered numerous challenges. Despite promising prototypes, the lack of Britain's extensive experience in wooden aircraft construction proved problematic. Adhesive issues and inconsistent quality control plagued the program, and the bombing of the specialized glue factory in 1944 ultimately led to its collapse. Attempts to replicate the concept also failed. By late 1943, the Mosquito had achieved a unique status in military history, simultaneously evoking fear, respect, and envy from the enemy. German aircrews were all too familiar with the Mosquito's distinctive silhouette and the sound of its Merlin engines, knowing they were likely in for a harrowing encounter. The once dismissed, wooden toy, had become the Luftwaffe's worst nightmare, just as the title had promised. On February 18, 1944, Operation Jericho was launched. This daring raid exemplified the versatility and capabilities of the Mosquito aircraft. The target was a prison in northern France, where over 700 inmates were held, including approximately 120 members of the French resistance who faced imminent execution. British intelligence had received desperate pleas from the French underground, urging them to either liberate these prisoners or ensure their swift demise before the Gestapo could extract information through torture. The decision was made to attempt the seemingly impossible: to breach the prison walls with such precision that the inmates could escape while minimizing casualties. Group Captain Percy Pickard spearheaded the mission, piloting one of the 19 Mosquitoes from 487 Squadron. The Royal New Zealand Air Force's 464 Squadron, the 29th Squadron of the Royal Air Force, and the 21st Squadron of the Royal Air Force collaborated on a daring mission. The plan demanded an unprecedented level of navigational precision, with the aircraft flying at near ground level across the English Channel and over occupied France in broad daylight. They followed railway lines, roads, and rivers, staying beneath German radar detection. Timing was critical, as they aimed to strike the prison during the lunch hour when guards would be in the mess and prisoners confined to their cells, maximizing German casualties while minimizing prisoner losses. The first wave of Mosquito aircraft roared over the prison walls at 12:01 p.m., traveling at breakneck speed. Soaring high above the landscape, a contingent of 250 mighty aircraft embarked on a critical mission, their altitude measured in feet rather than hundreds. The vanguard of this aerial force meticulously dropped their ordnance, timing the 11-second delay fuses to ensure a safe exit from the blast radius. The explosions tore gaping holes in the outer defenses, precisely as planned. Mere moments later, the second wave arrived, tasked with annihilating the guards' quarters. Their bombs struck the German barracks, detonating with devastating effect and inflicting numerous casualties among the guards. The third wave faced the most perilous assignment, targeting the main prison building where the guards' mess was situated. Yet, they were under strict orders to avoid damaging the cells housing the prisoners. Wing Commander Ian Smith led the final element with surgical precision, his bombs. The assault on the administration building and guard posts was remarkably precise. French inmates later recounted being able to discern the specific targets of the bombardment. By 12:04 p.m., the entire operation had concluded. The outer perimeter had been breached at multiple points. The guards had either perished or dispersed, and prisoners were already fleeing through the openings. In total, the Mosquito aircraft had executed the attack in under 3 minutes, dropping their ordnance from an altitude low enough to sustain damage from their own explosions, and were racing back toward the channel before German fighters could intervene. The human toll was substantial, with approximately 102 prisoners killed and the daring prison break saw over 250 inmates flee amidst the pandemonium, with a significant number evading recapture and finding refuge with the resistance. Tragically, Group Captain Pickard's aircraft was shot down during the return journey, resulting in the loss of both him and his navigator. Yet, the mission exceeded all expectations, leaving the Germans seething with fury at the unmatched skills on display. The lightning-fast pace, pinpoint precision, navigational prowess, and sheer audacity of the bombing raid. During the midday hours in occupied regions, the Amen prison became renowned among both the RAF and the resistance forces. This demonstrated the Mosquito's unparalleled capabilities, surpassing even the collective efforts of entire squadrons of heavy bombers. While 1,000 bombers could level a city, the Mosquito proved to be the essential tool for targeted strikes on specific buildings. The operational data told a story that even the most skeptical Air Ministry officials could not refute. Across all variants, the Mosquito's average loss rate was less than 1% per mission, a stark contrast to the 3 to 7% losses suffered by conventional heavy bombers like the Lancaster and Halifax. When dispatching crews into the perilous night combat, these statistics provided a compelling case for the Mosquito's unmatched efficiency and survivability. The Mosquito's remarkable resilience was no mere statistic. It was the difference between life and death for its aircrews. While a Lancaster crew in 1943 faced a daunting 25% chance of completing a full tour, their Mosquito counterparts enjoyed a far more promising 70% survival rate. Defying initial skepticism, this wooden wonder proved remarkably sturdy, outperforming its metal-bodied counterparts. The production figures tell a striking tale. From a mere 20 Mosquitoes in 1941, output skyrocketed to 426 the following year, then soared to 1,342 in 1943, peaking at 218 aircraft in 1944 as Britain rapidly embraced the resilient design it had once doubted. The de Havilland Mosquito, a versatile aircraft, continued its production even after the war's conclusion in 1945, with the last unit rolling off the assembly line in 1950. A total of 7,781 Mosquitoes were manufactured, with production facilities located in Britain, Canada, and Australia, leveraging local timber resources and skilled craftspeople. The distributed manufacturing model proposed by de Havilland in 1940 proved its worth, as Mosquito production increased despite the challenges faced by German factories under Allied bombing. While the total bomb tonnage delivered by Mosquito bombers during the war may have seemed modest compared to other aircraft, their combat effectiveness was undeniable. Massive aerial bombardments were executed by formidable 34-05 bombers. Yet the critical factor lies elsewhere. They accomplished this with far fewer sortie runs and exponentially lower losses. The cost per unit 34-12 metric heavily favored the Mosquito by enormous margins. Accounting for crew training duration, fuel 34-19 consumption, maintenance demands, and replacement expenses, the Mosquito delivered ordnance more efficiently 34-24 than any other bomber in the RAF's arsenal. Night fighter variants demonstrated kill ratios that redefined the realm of 34-31 nocturnal combat. Mosquito night fighters were credited with approximately 600 German aircraft 34-37 destroyed over Europe, including bombers and night fighters. Individual pilots amassed scores that would have seemed 34-44 implausible in earlier night fighters. Wing Commander Brenza Burbridge, Flight Lieutenant Karol Kuttelwasser, a Czech pilot serving in one squadron, earned the moniker, the Night Reaper, for downing 18 German aircraft in just 4 months during 1942. Achieving an impressive tally of 21 confirmed kills, all at night while flying the nimble Mosquito fighter bomber. The Mosquito's design empowered skilled pilots, amplifying their abilities rather than constraining them. While the reconnaissance variant's success is more challenging to quantify, these aircraft flew over 2,000 missions during the war, gathering crucial intelligence that informed strategic planning. They photographed a range of targets, including V-weapon sites, submarine pens, invasion beaches, and industrial facilities, with near impunity, as German air defenses could only shoot down a handful of these photo-reconnaissance Mosquitoes throughout the conflict. The Mosquito's remarkable versatility and cost-effectiveness made it an indispensable asset for Allied forces during the war. When intelligence was needed from deep within Germany, the nimble Mosquito was the aircraft of choice, able to evade enemy defenses with ease. The stark contrast in manufacturing costs further highlighted the Mosquito's advantages. A single Lancaster bomber could be replaced by over 4 Mosquitoes, yet these smaller aircraft could undertake more missions and sustain fewer losses with smaller crews. What had once been dismissed as a risky gamble had now become the most cost-effective combat plane of the conflict. The skeptics who had initially scoffed at the wooden wonder's potential were now forced to acknowledge its critical importance. The Mosquito's impact extended far beyond mere operational metrics. It radically upended long-held beliefs about aircraft engineering that had shaped military aviation for 2 decades. The prevailing philosophy in bomber design had centered around defensive armaments, the notion that such aircraft required extensive gun emplacements to survive. Iconic models like the American B-17 Flying Fortress exemplified this approach, bristling with machine guns to ward off enemy fire. The underlying doctrine was straightforward: equip bombers with sufficient firepower to fight their way through hostile defenses. However, the Mosquito demonstrated the flaws in this logic. Agility and velocity proved more effective defensive assets than any gun turret. Moreover, the weight savings from omitting armaments could be redirected towards engines, fuel, and other performance-enhancing features. The English Electric Canberra, a jet-powered aircraft that entered service in 1951, embodied a philosophy akin to the legendary Mosquito. Prioritizing speed and performance over firepower, this unarmed bomber served with air forces worldwide for over 6 decades, testament to the soundness of its underlying design. American designers took heed, with the Martin B-57, the American counterpart to the Canberra, seeing action during the Vietnam War. Even modern strategic bombers like the B-2 Spirit adhered to the Mosquito's legacy, emphasizing stealth and velocity over defensive armaments. The construction techniques pioneered for the Mosquito also influenced the development of civilian aircraft in the post-war era. The sandwich construction approach, which bonds diverse materials into lightweight yet rigid structures, became a cornerstone of composite aircraft design. This technique, pioneered by furniture makers crafting Mosquito fuselages, now underpins modern sailplanes, light aircraft, and even components of commercial airliners. The principle of employing non-strategic materials and distributed manufacturing proved pivotal for post-war aviation development in nations lacking heavy industry. Furthermore, the Mosquito validated the multi-role combat aircraft concept, a revolutionary idea in the 1940s that is now commonplace. This versatile airframe served as a bomber, night fighter, fighter bomber, pathfinder, and reconnaissance platform. The Mosquito's versatility challenged the prevailing military mindset of specialized aircraft. Unlike modern multi-role fighters, earlier warplanes were typically optimized for specific missions, bombers, fighters, or reconnaissance. However, the Mosquito's exceptional design allowed it to excel in diverse roles, from anti-shipping strikes to weather reconnaissance. This adaptability proved more valuable than a fleet of specialized aircraft. The Mosquito's impact also extended to the psychological realm, undermining the German propaganda narrative of technical supremacy. German engineering, precision, and innovation had been the cornerstones of their wartime rhetoric, but the Mosquito's capabilities contradicted this image. The unassuming British bomber, crafted from humble wooden materials, shattered the myth of German aerial supremacy. This resilient aircraft outperformed the vaunted metal fighters of the Luftwaffe, proving that innovation and clever design can triumph over brute force and expensive resources. The psychological impact on the German forces was profound, as they watched their airspace dominated by these seemingly inferior wooden planes. The Mosquito's legacy extended well beyond the war, with variants serving in various air forces worldwide until the 1960s, even as target tugs. This remarkable aircraft's longevity and adaptability stood as a testament to the power of ingenuity over perceived might. The iconic fighter plane's remarkable journey traversed the tumultuous years from the Battle of Britain to the dawn of supersonic aviation. Defying expectations, this wooden and glue-constructed marvel outlived many of its contemporaries in the skies over World War II. While the Germans initially dismissed it as a fragile toy, history has cemented its legacy as one of the most accomplished combat aircraft ever conceived. This masterpiece, forged in the crucible of wartime necessity, would go on to achieve legendary status through its exceptional capabilities.